We're here today because the American Tort Reform Association released their annual ranking of judicial hellholes across the country. And Louisiana ranked number 7 on that list of the worst places in the country to be sued.
And what kind of an impact does this have on the average person?
Sure. Well, the good news about the rankings is that Louisiana has moved down in the rankings. We've improved over last year's number 2 spot ranking. The bad news, of course, is that we're still on the list at number 7. And that's bad news for regardless of where you are in Louisiana. If you're a small business owner, that's a signal that you're at a high risk of being sued. If you're a doctor or a teacher, you're at a high risk of being sued. And if you're driving a car on your way home from work one day and you get into a fender bender, you're at a pretty high risk of being sued. There's no question that Louisiana has a very difficult legal climate and a lot of excessive litigation. Judicial hellholes are the worst places in the country to be sued. Essentially, they're places where judges systematically apply the law and procedures in an unfair and an unbalanced manner. You know, as citizens and members of society, we expect from our judicial system for judges and juries to look at the facts of the case and decide and provide justice based on those facts. What you don't want is a system of impartiality and unbalance. You don't want a situation where judges have relationships with lawyers who are practicing before them. Lawyers on either side, be it plaintiffs' lawyers or defense attorneys. You don't want improper relationships between judges and lawyers influencing the outcome of cases. And unfortunately, there are some very high-profile examples of that happening here in Louisiana, and that's one of the main reasons why we're on the judicial hellholes list this year. Obviously, that's not the kind of behavior we like to see from our judges. We hold our judges to a very high standard of ethical conduct, and the Supreme Court does as well. Judge Robin Free ended up with a what I would consider to be a slap on the wrist sanction of a 30-day suspension, and he had to pay back a few $1,000s to the Judiciary Commission. We'd like to see fewer instances of judges and plaintiffs' lawyers having close relationships, and we'd also like to see the Supreme Court be more assertive in exercising their oversight authority when instances like that present themselves.
Where does Louisiana rank compared to other states?
Unfortunately, Louisiana has been consistently ranked as one of the poorest states in the country when it comes to our legal climate. Obviously, the Judicial Hellholes ranking is a big part of that. Since the American Tort Reform Association started this annual ranking of hellholes across the country in 2002, Louisiana has never escaped inclusion in the report. In addition to that, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has issued its report on state legal climates for several years. We've always been ranked number 48th or 49th at the very bottom of their list. And there are numerous other national and state surveys that rank states based on their legal climate, and Louisiana consistently ranks poorly in all categories. This can be difficult criticism to hear and to interpret, but the consistency of these rankings sends a very clear message that we've got to work harder to improve Louisiana's legal climate.
What kind of an impact does this have on jobs in Louisiana?
Well, that's the most significant aspect of these judicial hellhole rankings. As we know from talking to small business owners and larger companies that a state's legal climate is a significant factor when they're considering whether or not they should open up a business or whether to expand a business or relocate a business from another state. Small businesses look at the state legal climate and they know that one lawsuit or one runaway jury can absolutely put them out of business. We have several supporters who are in that position right now. We also know that energy producers in Louisiana, in particular, are under fire from a very aggressive trial bar, who's brought a very aggressive litigation in recent years. And so that's a significant factor when companies are deciding where to place their investments, where to create new jobs. They look at that and they say, well, maybe we should go to another state that has at least a fair and impartial legal climate where if we find ourselves in litigation, we know we're going to get a fair shake.
What's the answer? What needs to be done in Louisiana?
Sure. We need more reform. The legislature did a great job this year, earlier in 2014 legislative session, looking at some of the most significant issues that are of interest to supporters of legal reform and small business owners across the state. One of the major pieces of legislation we passed this year put an end to the buddy system. Prior to our reform legislation, it was perfectly legal for the state attorney general to hand out highly lucrative contracts to anyone he wanted, mostly as campaign contributors, to lawyers to do work on behalf of the state. We put the reform bill that we passed put an end to that practice. It will provide the reform bill that we passed will provide oversight on the hiring practices of individuals who are doing work on behalf of the state in litigation, and we'll also put a cap on the maximum hourly rates that they can charge the state when they're working on our behalf. And those are the kinds of reforms that will help, that are helping to improve Louisiana's legal climate. Those are the kinds of reforms that help inspire public confidence in our judiciary. And those are the kinds of reforms that will help us get off of this judicial hellholes list once and for all.
Tell us about the legislative priorities for your organization in 2015.
Sure. Another major reform that we hope to pass in 2015 is an effort to lower Louisiana's jury trial threshold. This is an example of a unique law that only exists in Louisiana that effectively limits citizen access to the civil justice system. This is an arbitrary barrier of $50,000, whereby if you are involved in litigation for less than $50,000, your case is automatically decided by a judge rather than a jury of your peers. And it's known in the legal circle as the jury trial threshold. We'd like to pass a bill to eliminate that jury trial threshold to give citizens greater access to our courts. And that will also help to rein in excessive litigation in Louisiana. You know, we have some of the highest automobile insurance rates in the country, and certainly the jury trial threshold and the excessive litigation that it allows is a huge part of that. We'd like to eliminate that jury trial threshold, rein in excessive litigation, and help to make Louisiana's legal climate fairer for everyone. It'll have an impact on just about everybody's pocketbook.
If people have questions like more information, what should they do?
Sure. If they'd like to learn more about the Judicial Hellholes Report, they can visit judicialhellholes.org. And if they'd like to learn more about our work to improve the state's legal climate, they can visit us online at llaw.org.